Hey everyone, I'm Chris Lesniak,
And I'm Rob Byer, and this is
the DebateMath Podcast.
welcome everyone to the season finale.
And we thought we'd do something a little different this episode.
We've invited back a few of our guests from the past debates for a roundtable to reflect on the past debates and also engage in a discussion around the question, what is the purpose of math class?
We've had this question literally be asked in past episodes, and it is something underlining some of the discussions we've had with our guests. And we hope it will lead to an enlightening discussion with our group of guests today.
So let's not waste any time and let's get to our guests. Our first guest is from our very first debate, a lead teacher at the Discovery School and a presidential awardee for excellence in mathematics and science, who loves listening to music, but his ability to play music is currently non existent. He also delivered an amazing Ignite at CMC South, Mr. Zach Champagne. Hi, Zach.
What's up, Rob, Chris, rest of the team? Good to see you all.
Hey, can you remind us where you are and what your current role is?
Yeah, for sure. I teach third and fourth grade students in a multi-age classroom in Jacksonville, Florida. When my lovely kiddos, third and fourth graders, go to their enrichments, I also teach seventh grade math. Also get to have the privilege of traveling around the country and working with teachers all over. So humbled to be here again today. Thanks for having me back.
Now, you were on our first debate, uh, all about the definition of a trapezoid. Has your thinking changed at all since the airing of that episode?
I just showed Rob my shirt for the those on the audio medium here. No, my thinking hasn't changed. I have become more resolute in one thing I'll talk a little bit about, but I do want to just acknowledge, I think, Shelby made an excellent argument in that debate, and we continue to have this conversation every time I get to learn with and from Shelby. This notion of one path of the hierarchy, it's really tempting, right? The idea that inclusivity allows us to see each quadrilateral as a more specific version of another is really something to consider. But I think where my thinking has changed is I've come more resolute in this fact. I'll call it a fact. The most interesting thing to me about this debate and about trapezoids is their ambiguity. The fact that we get to debate the shape and the investigation is about more about what definition affords us or what it takes away from us. For me, that's the work we do with kids, right? And that debate is enticing. Once folks know about that controversy, they have an opinion. And I think for me, the win is that I now have 25-ish third through seventh graders wearing trapezoid shirts at my school. So to me, the debate is the most interesting part. So while I stand true to my side, I think where I've become more resolute in the fact that it's about the conversation and it's about what we can learn from each definition.
That's fantastic. Welcome back.
Yes, welcome back. And now on to our second guest, who is from our second debate. He's founder of Math Plus Academy, a founding member of the Global Math Project, and a man on a mission to make math irresistible to kids. Also a Ted Lasso superfan, Dr. Raj Shah. Hi, Raj.
Hey, glad to be here.
Can you remind us where you are and what your current role is?
I live in Columbus, Ohio, and you kind of mentioned a couple of my current roles. I also teach a math methods class at Ohio State. And as you guys know, I'm just going to remind everyone to be curious, not judgmental.
And so you were on our second debate about memorization in math class. Has your thinking shifted at all in the time since that debate?
Well, I tell you, I enjoyed the debate. I think it did remind me that there's a lot of nuance in this conversation about what is the role of memorization. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've been reflecting on is, of course, there are a small number of things that you need to memorize or you ought to memorize or will make your life easier if you memorize. And what we really were arguing about is what is the best way to do that? And I think we're all in pretty much agreement that rote memorization is generally not the best way to do that. There needs to be connection in how people think about things and connect one fact to another and in a context and all that. So I've just have a much more nuanced way of talking about that argument versus taking one side or the other side.
Welcome back, Raj. Next up is a 24-year teaching veteran, math magic maker, ungrading aficionado, and origami apprentice, Mr. Nolan Fossum. Hey, Nolan.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back.
Can you remind us where you are and what your current role is?
Yeah, I'm in my first year at a school that's new for me. It's Mount Miguel High School in the San Diego area. I'm teaching Integrated Math 2 and Integrated Math 3.
You were in a debate last year about grading. How has your thinking changed at all since that debate?
Well, our topic was the who sets the standard for grading? Should it be the teacher? Should it be the students, or some combination? And my thinking about this is probably changing day by day. Over the last, I'd say, a couple of weeks, I've sort of hit a spot where I'm like, you know what, it really does need to be a student-driven thing. And I know that there's a lot of challenges with implementing this right now. There's a lot of questions about releasing control. But I really feel like a lot of the students that I'm working with this year would be served by my having a lot more flexibility in letting them sort of show me where their bright spots are, how I adapt to the things they're doing, but also how I sort of make space for the things that I'm assigning that they aren't doing. It's just teaching me a lot about my own practice and a lot about the way they think. So still on my mind.
Awesome. Next up, we have mathematics instructor at Moravian University, a national board certified teacher with 30 years of experience who served as an AP stats reader since 2010, a Desmos certified presenter, and has a 96% rate in over 300 games of Wordle. Lee Notaro. Hi, Lee. How are you?
I'm doing great. I got 4 for Wordle today. It was 2 yesterday. So I'm trying to not only keep my success rate up, but lower my average. As a stats person, it's all about the average.
Well, can you remind us where you are and what your current role is?
Yes, so I teach at Moravian University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I teach the Math for Elementary Teachers course, the Elementary Statistics course, and I teach the Business Math course as well. So, and last semester I did some student teaching supervision, which was awesome to get into the classrooms and see the students interact with high school students.
Nice. And so your debate last year was about AP stats. So has your thinking changed at all since then?
It has a little bit because I really liked what Bill Phil had to say about how we need to maybe adjust how we have students analyze data. So when AP statistics came out in 1997, of course, the graphing calculator was like brand new on the scene. And it was like, you need to use the graphing calculator to do statistics. And of course, we know that real data is messy, and real data is not something you can do on a handheld calculator. And so Bill was arguing for kind of throwing away kind of the cookie cutter approach of AP stats, and really getting into digging into data and coding and things like that. And I would say that, you know, that's actually a really valid argument. You know, here we are about 25 years after the first AP statistics exam, and we really haven't changed the technology tool that we're using. And that's kind of a shame because pretty much everybody's carrying around a computer in their pockets these days.
Welcome back, Lee. So next up is a man who really needs no introduction. You know him as your favorite math educator's favorite educator, Dr. Christopher J. Childs. Dr. Childs, how are you?
Doing well in yourself.
Oh, great. Can you remind us all where you are and what your current role is?
I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that in mathematics education, a little bit of everything all across the country. Get to travel and meet some amazing educators. And let's just do all things math education. Right now, I am based in that magical state of FLA. Some may know it as Florida. It is the most magical place in the world, however you want to define magical.
So you were in a debate last year about the I do, we do, you do. Has your thinking changed at all since then?
If you think my thinking has changed, you don't know me. You know I'm strong-willed, and once I pick what I'm going to go with, I'm going to ride it till the wheels fall off. And my whole piece is with this, with the gradual release of responsibility. If we look at it, we still have opportunity gaps for children. We still have things not working. And at some point, adults creating these environments have to be willing to change and do something different. And at what point do we treat children like popping popcorn? when we pop popcorn, all the kernels don't pop at the same time, no matter how much time is on the clock. But at the end of the time, they all pop. Some still don't pop. That doesn't mean they're bad kernels. It just means they need a little bit more time to bake, and we need to provide them an opportunity to showcase their ability to turn into popcorn. Just like children in the classroom, we focus on I do, we do, you do, your mama do, it's a bunch of do-do. Yeah, I believe that. This is a static formula to getting children to learn math. The same way we approach math and thinking children can learn it page by page, every single day, lesson by lesson. If they learn that fast, we wouldn't be here on this screen. We wouldn't be talking about math education. We can put them in front of a computer, but every child brings into the environment a unique value prop, a unique skill set. Our job is to build upon it. And with the gradual release of responsibility, we don't get to build upon it. I believe every child has genius level potential, and they're like that kernels in the bag. I just got to give them a little time to pop. Some are going to pop soon, some are going to pop later, but at the end of the day, I believe in each and every one of them, and my children that serve under me are going to pop.
Man,
Excellent.
Good to have you back.
So glad to have you here, Chris. And last but not least is an educator, a math coach, speaker, and an author who was born on April Fool's Day, Kristen Acosta. Hi, Kristen.
And if you know me, it totally fits my personality. Really, I live up to that, I guess useless fact anyway. So, hi.
Hi. Remind us where you are and what your current role is.
I'm currently teaching 6th grade math in a school district in LA County. But I'm also, I go to conferences and whatever, and lately districts have been calling me up asking for professional development and stuff. So I too have been kind of starting to travel and whatnot too. So, like Dr. Child said, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, wherever life takes me, I'm game, I'm all for the opportunity and, and just, to spread the love of math all over the place. So it's awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so your debate last year was on elementary math specialization.
Yeah.
Has your thinking changed since that discussion?
My thinking hasn't changed, but I received a lot of feedback in that. And when my partner, Mike Flynn, and I were preparing, we didn't necessarily prepare that, okay, we're going to be pro teacher. We debated whether or not elementary math should be taught by specialists, or let's just say by one teacher. And there was a big debate about what do we call it, specialist versus departmentalization and so on. But a lot of people who gave me feedback said, you really were arguing pro teacher. And I said, oh, we didn't have that in mind, but that's very interesting. Whereas the other side was arguing pro student, and not that we were anti-student on our side, but that's their takeaway. And even other takeaways were, I had some people come up to me and said, we know we compromised, this is why I love this space, is that, it's a safe space that we could all compromise and not keep, at it. That we said, I think it was starting in 2nd grade and up, it would be okay. I had a kindergarten teacher said, I've tried it in kindergarten, it works in kindergarten. Okay, so, I've gotten lots of feedback, but the point that they received from us is that one side was pro teacher and the other side was trying to argue for the student themselves, the whole child. Was interesting to me because I don't think we set out to do that, but that's what occurred. So.
Excellent. Well, we are so glad to have all 6 of you here. Let's get right into it.
So prior to tonight's recording, we reached out to all you and asked you to ponder this question. What is the purpose of math class?
So we'd like to give a chance for each of you to talk. We want to hear from each of you briefly. And I thought, let's work backwards through the order we just introduced you all. So not to put you on the spot here, but Kristen, can you start us off? What's the purpose of math class?
Well, I wrote down just a whole bunch of things. I didn't necessarily put it in paragraph form, but so I'm just going to kind of, I guess, riff. But here's what, and I asked a couple of other teachers or whatever, and I said, what do you think? Because I like to collectively represent, especially elementary math. But a lot of them said, sometimes it's about understanding patterns, helping understand the world that we live in and be able to describe the world. And we're not just talking geometry, but, why are some of these things happening? Interconnectedness is something. But when it comes, and of course, mathematics shouldn't be about being calculators. We have those already. It should be about problem solvers, being able to look at something and think our way through something. Other people said, it's about perseverance, kind of goes along with the problem solving, that sometimes we can do hard things And, we may not, expect these kids, but, you tell them you could do these hard things. It's okay. And kind of lift their spirits. And on top of that, besides setting up like number sense or whatever, but just having voices and ideas and being able to have some inquiry, the science behind it as well. But, just all those things is what I think the purpose of our math classes are. Now, whether or not that's what's happening, that's a whole nother debate. But anyway, so that would be my best definition of what a purpose of math class is.
Great. We're going to move on to Dr. Childs. Dr. Childs, the same question to you. What is the purpose of math class?
I think we first need to understand what needs to happen before we even get to the purpose. And what needs to happen before we get to the purpose is making sure every child's identity is represented during their mathematics experience. Too often in a subject matter that can really make sense of the entire world, children do not see themselves represented. They don't see their identities included. So we need to authentically make sure they're included within the environment. The next thing that needs to happen, going along with Kristen, we need to make sure we use rich problem solving. We're in 2022. The time is out for rote routines and a bunch of worksheets, and nothing against y'all fact families, folks, but 100 problems with fact families is not going to help a child get prepared for real life beyond your classroom. So we have to think about, what does rich problem solving look like? And then what we need to ultimately do is provide connections to real life context, not just real world context. What's the difference? A real world is one of those make-believe things that may happen. The problem where there are 100 watermelons on the back of a little bitty truck and then one falls off the truck. Yeah, that may happen in the real world. I'm pretty sure I've never seen it happen. You probably haven't either, but that's a real world context. It could be intriguing. It could be interesting. When we think about real life context, what about context that actually impact children in their daily lives? Can we provide them opportunities to find one half of their utility bill? Can we provide them opportunities to use mathematics if they like to cook? Can we provide them the opportunity to use mathematics if they like entrepreneurship? Can we provide them the opportunity to use mathematics if they want to develop a community garden? What are contexts that children like that can make sense to their personal lives, that can really affect change, as opposed to so focused on these arbitrary examples in these old antiquated textbooks that children may or may not encounter? We wonder why I don't like math. Math doesn't make sense to me. Well, it shouldn't, based upon these arbitrary problems that you have. But if I can put mathematics in your real life context, bring you into the story, and not just putting your name in there and being, I put the name in the problem, that means nothing. But I put your life story into it, and then you can take that back to your family and showcase, how can math help our family and our community? That's what the purpose of math should be, of changing the world and changing just how we see things in general.
Excellent. Okay, Lee, you're up. What do you see as the purpose of math class?
So I actually wrote a paragraph down here because I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget my ideas. And actually, this question is not a new question, right? As it was mentioned earlier, I've been in education for 30 years, and so this is a question that came into my classroom back in the mid 1990s. So I remember being asked this question, or a similar question, from a student perspective. Of course, their question is, when are we ever going to use this, right? They're really asking, what's the purpose of math class? But that's how students ask that. And when I was first starting out teaching, this thought never even crossed my mind. It's well, math is great. Why doesn't everybody love math? I love math, So when a student asked that question, I was like, oh my gosh, how do I answer that question? And of course, the student asked that question in a full classroom with everybody else around, why are we learning this? When are we ever going to use this? And at the time, I just remember saying something about the fact that learning math would allow them to be able to do anything in their life, after high school. And, I thought really that teaching certain topics and making sure that we covered everything in the curriculum was the way to do that. But now I don't really think it's the topics that matter so much. And I think I'm kind of in agreement with what the other speakers are saying. It's more about the mathematical dispositions that matter more. Students need to be taught in the ways to help them think like mathematicians, to notice patterns and describe patterns, and then generalize those patterns. Because putting things together and making those observations is what they are going to be doing in the real world. It doesn't really matter if a student has learned about polar functions or parametric functions in high school. What really matters is that we help them to learn to think like a mathematician.
Thank you, Lee. No, taking it over to Nolan now. Nolan, what's the purpose of math class?
Well, it's got to be something different than what we've been doing, right? Because not all of our students are thriving. So I'm going to start with that right there. I'm very much in line with what Dr. Childs said, that our math education has to be focusing around our students' identities, bring them into the context of our work. I read an article that Catherine Ye had posted in a tweet thread recently. It was something she and a couple others had co-authored in Mathematics Teacher Educator. And there's this phrase in it that's really been resonating with me. And they were talking about shifting from solely prioritizing content toward a simultaneous prioritization of context, content, and critical analysis. And for me, that those three things have been really hitting it, because like we always do content. Like we're never going to lose content. There's no risk of losing the content standards, all that kind of stuff. But we often sacrifice the context, which is where we bring it meaningful for the kids. And I mean, is there any critical analysis in a lot of our students' math class experience? It's sorely lacking. So that's what I'm pushing for. This kind of sort of builds in my mind also on the work of Dr. Goldie Mohammed and her 5 pursuits. So we got a lot of skills. We got a lot of intellectual in terms of like applying things in a context, but not a whole lot of identity work, which is number 1 in Dr. Mohammed's work. Very little criticality. And I mean, come on, is there ever enough joy in math class? So that's what I'm.
Awesome. All right. And next up, Dr. Raj Shah. Raj, what is the purpose of math class?
Oh man, this is a hard question, right? Because I feel like math there's a lot of aspects to math, but in my mind, there's two main things. Okay. Math is a powerful lens through which you can look at the universe and try to understand the world around you, right? But math is also this amazing, beautiful playground where you could just search for hidden patterns and look for structure and just explore and conjecture and do this wonderful stuff. And I feel like we get lost in this mix a little bit of what is the purpose of math class? And I think the answer is both of these things are true, that we can do both of these things at the same time. It's not an either or position. And the way I see it now is currently we're in this space of math is useful. You know, you need to know it or you will not be successful in the world. And that is the only reason that we're here. And that's why we just try to pour into your brain as many facts and standards and algorithms and procedures as we can, because somehow that's going to make your life better. And I think there is an opposing camp that says, well, no, you know, math is this, like I said, this playground. So we should just play and not worry about the standards, and we should explore and conjecture. And it's like, no, we can do both of these things at the same time. And by the way, the more you learn about mathematics, the more things that you know, the bigger the playground gets. So it's like a virtuous cycle. So I think we need to find a place where we are teaching kids how to make sense of the world around them, because math is an extremely powerful lens through which you can look at the universe and understand the world around you. But also, man, it's a fun place to just play. I love doing puzzles and problems for fun. So why can't we have both of those experiences at the same time? And several people in here brought up student identity, right? And what are we doing to students when we convince them that they're not a math person, which is what school math has been doing to students for who knows how long. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And if we can find this balance, I think we can help build that identity of, A, I enjoy doing this thing. B, it can be useful sometimes, and that's kind of cool. I think it fits together.
Thanks, Raj. And finally, Zach, what is the purpose of math class?
I pre-wrote a summary of everyone's talk already, so that's what I have for you all today. No, look, I think the purpose of math class is to provide a space where our students can be creative. It's a space where they should feel free to try things. It should be a space where they can attempt to solve a problem without the fear of being judged by their teacher or their peers. It's got to be a judgment-free zone, right? And you guys can talk to Nolan later about grading if you want to think about judgment. I'm not going to take that torch right now. To me, to that end, math class at its very best is a place where kids are being prepared to be powerful problem solvers. We've heard that throughout this panel, right? And that's both in and beyond mathematics. It's a place that lets kids know that math is bigger than a 45, 60, 90, 120-minute block, right? But to do this, math class has to be a space that is inclusive, right? Because the math is better when everyone's involved. Now, I live in a state where my current governor and my current Department of Education doesn't necessarily align with that view. So what it boils down to for me, and Dr. Childs and I have had a lot of conversation about this, being that we both live in Florida currently. But I think we are working against a math education system that wants to keep students who do not align or belong to the dominant norm out and give others the opportunity and privilege of coming in. But for me, the purpose of math class is the opposite of that. It's a space where everyone is invited and everyone is involved. And it has to be a space where kids feel like they can belong so they can be creative and become the powerful problem solvers we want them to be.
Wow, excellent. You've already given us tons to think about. I love how much commonality there is already in just what all of you are saying, a lot about the need for focus on like problem solving, and almost all of you mentioned something about creativity or play as part of it as math class. I love the talk about inclusivity and judgment-free zone and all that stuff as well, where students really feel included. I'm wondering, I want to ask the like painful question here of like, why, when we think of a typical math class, is that not what we see? And I'll like one or two of you maybe want to jump in on this.
I'm going to jump in first. So when I was observing the student teachers, the mantra in this one student teacher's classroom, and it was probably because of the school that she was in, but when the students asked why are we learning this, it was pretty much because it's on the test, right? The state test. So I think that that can really kill a lot of the ideal classroom that's being described here. I remember at one point I was told that, okay, you need to break from your curriculum and what you're teaching and teach out of this book to help students prepare for the test. You got to do this for 2 weeks. And my first year in that one school, I was teaching in New Jersey at the time, I did it. But then after that, I was like, you know what? If I'm just teaching good math, they're going to be fine on that. I don't need to teach to a test. I need to teach them how to think, and so that's what I did. I didn't let them know that I was doing that. I just didn't teach out of the book for those 2 weeks for about 3 or 4 years. But yeah, state testing, I think, can really make teachers feel like they can't do a lot of the things that we've been describing here today.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Okay. And it's funny that you say that because one of the things I wrote down, and I forget who was talking, is I think it was Dr. Raj was saying, sometimes the kids need to learn that math is okay. It's okay to play, because that's how, especially for the little people, as I call them, that's how they explore. That's how they're learning, is they play. But I think some of the issues, and I'm going to, veer towards, especially in elementary, is that joy of playing and learning and exploring is killed by, I hate to say it, textbooks. All the teachers love to just stick with the textbook. That's it, because maybe they don't feel so comfortable doing some inquiry-based learning or some, different routines that are, now kind of the norm, for instance, in my classroom, versus no, I got to get to page 47 by next Tuesday. I got to get to, and then guess what? There's a unit test and whatever, and we got to stick to the curriculum, because that maybe is the expectation depending on the district or whatever administrator has told them that. So I think all that pressure is kind of killing what could be very playful learning, social type of subject. And I mean, and then by the time they get to, for instance, your grade levels in middle school, high school, they've had that instilled in them that math is just in a textbook and not all around us. And I mean, and that, I hate that personally, and I want them to enjoy, but I think that's kind of part of the issue here as well.
And Raj, you want to add?
Yeah, I'd love to build off of Lee and Kristen. I mean, the way I think about it is, how did we all learn math? How did the teachers learn math? Almost all of them learned in a very traditional sit in rows, right? Lecture, listen, take notes fashion. Also, people often disparage play. Like, okay, maybe it's okay for little kids to play, but like, come on, high school, we don't play in high school. This is a learning, place of learning, higher learning. I don't know. So there's these preconceived notions that we have about the way that we learned it, the way it was taught to us. And to teach math differently than how you've experienced it your entire life is extremely difficult. And most teachers never got any training on how to do that in a different way. And when you're being measured by high stakes testing, your students are being measured by high stakes testing, it really takes away your ability to take any risk and try something different, unless you're one of these unique people who feels comfortable going against the system, or you've got a ton of experience and security and you feel like you can, but most people can't. They don't feel empowered to do it and haven't been trained to do it. So the status quo continues.
Yeah, that's so true, Raj. And I'm gonna, piggyback off of that idea, and I'm gonna go towards like Nolan, Zach, and Dr. Childs. We keep talking about making changes and shifting because like what the current status quo is just it's not working. So if you had a magic wand, what one major change? It could be one major change. Like what would you make?
That's easy for me. I would diminish this over reliance on standards. I would bring in critical questions about like, why do we have all these standards and who wrote them and why are they our standards? I would shift the conversation around, well, we know the kind of things we talk about as equitable in mathematics teaching practices and how those things seem to be at odds. They shouldn't be, but they are at odds with our content standards. So I would want to kind of like Catherine Ye's article, like put those into a proper position, not as the be all and end all. So there's conversations about eliminating this over focus on testing. But I guess if I had that wand, what it would do is I would bring all the parents in, bring all the caregivers in, and start having meetings where we talk about what they want for their kids. And I want to know where that voice is. The things they want for their kids are not the things that we're measuring on our chapter tests, but they are the things that I think would make a difference for how we start interacting with our students. They would help us to see students first and content after that. And I think if we had that sort of as a more elevated voice, we'd start to see some ground.
Zach, go ahead.
Yeah. I was gonna say get rid of standards. Confess my unpopular opinion, maybe. But I'll piggyback on what Nolan's saying and say, let's get rid of the race to calculus in high school, right? Like that notion that every kid has to take that is the reason why we feel this push in as early as the first and second graders I taught 2 years ago, in the fact that we have to get through whatever it is by the end of the year. So this notion that we have to push everything down. I mean, and I hate to keep harping on my home state, but Florida's incredibly guilty of this with having advanced courses for kids as early as in grade 3. We have an advanced grade 3 course in Florida adopted by the state, right? Like we are pushing everything down. And so that race to calculus, I think, is really forcing us to lose the joy, the creativity, because all of the things everyone else has said, we have to be on page 87 on day 24 or we can't finish. So.
Dr. Childs?
I'm gonna take 2 magic wands. The first magic wand would be to first develop a policy, and a policy that the educators have to be representative of the race identity, gender identity of the children of which are being served across the country. We have to make sure children feel represented and see themselves in the educational field, which right now we need a policy to address that. The second thing is a policy that all curriculum experiences, especially mathematics education, have to include culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally relevant pedagogy. Let me correct that. Culturally relevant pedagogy is the work of Dr. Gloria Latson-Billings. And the reason I say through a policy lens, we obviously, Jack and I keep representing Florida. That's what folks are using. They're using policy lenses to make decisions. So we can do the reverse engineering. Let's use a policy lens to do the right thing on behalf of children. If we engage in culturally relevant pedagogy throughout, just like we engage in all these other pieces, guess what can happen? Children can learn about other children. Children can see themselves. Children will still experience academic success. And most importantly, they will obtain the outcome of critical consciousness where we can really change things for the better, where everybody is valued in this society, in this world, and we use mathematics as a catalyst for change.
Raj, you want to jump in there?
Can I get the wand?
Sure.
May I please have the wand? Thank you. Thank you for giving me the wand. Okay. All those are all great answers. There's so many answers to this question. Here's what I would change. I would change how we respect doctors with how we respect teachers in our culture. I would pay them commensurate accordingly with that respect that we give doctors. I would pay teachers the same. And I would train teachers like we train doctors. Lots of schooling, internship, residency, mentoring, all that. This is a extremely difficult job teaching children. That's what I would do.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Kristen, you want the wand too?
Yeah, why not? Since
Everybody
we're
wants
all-
the wand.
Although
Let's go.
I'm going to sanitize it because you've all been sticking on it. Anyway, it's that kind of time. It's funny that this question is brought up because I was just reading, I believe it was Education Weekly, wherever. I'm sure you guys seen in the news that Bill Gates, the foundation, is going to give like $1 billion, and now it's going to math education. And they put out the question of, to teachers, where do you think this money should go to? And one of the two things, and Dr. Raj, I gotta, is training, is that teachers need training, and two, professional development, which kind of can go hand in hand. And then most importantly, get rid of the testing, so I think coming from the elementary perspective is that, yeah, there's not exactly a comfort level to teach, I don't want to say the new way of math, but, this current like inquiry-based type of, whereas because that's not how they learn. So how do we expect teachers to go about doing that if they're only used to teaching the way they learned, kind of thing? So, but with that comes training, and with that just time to get together and go, okay, let's like plan some units and not just, go through the textbook by, rote pages or whatever. So, so I just read about this literally a couple of days ago, and that's what some of the teachers were telling, is like just professional development, giving us the time to be able to plan things, and then of course then it would be a lot easier to implement them, because right now I see just the training alone at some elementary schools is just, here, how to use a textbook, here, how to use my curriculum, and that's what they're calling math training, which it's totally not. So anyway, so I concur.
I want to piggyback on that real quick, Kristen, because this past weekend at CMC South, got the privilege to see Chase Orton live, and he talked about his book, The Imperfect and Unfinished Math Teacher, and it's a journey of taking back your professional growth. And I think, like, even when we're training and the professional learning and the professional development, I think that also has to be reworked. It's not just in the classroom. It's like, how are we training and supporting teachers as well? So to your point, that was something that I wanted to kind of point out too, because I heard him speak. I've been reading the book since I got back, and he's right. Like, we definitely need to change the way that we're training and supporting teachers, so that way then they can make these shifts in their classrooms as well.
I just want to give a chance. Lee, did you want to take the wand as well and make any quick changes?
I mean, I think all of these ideas are amazing, and I really think that giving teachers time. What Kristen was saying is that the teachers need the time to implement these changes and to grow as professionals and to collaborate. There's been schools that I've taught at, and I've taught in Iowa, Vermont, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. There's been times where I've taught at schools and I haven't had time to collaborate. And I really feel that if you're teaching in a bubble, you really don't know what else can go on and what else should be done. Then at one point I taught in an independent school, and there I had time to collaborate because I only taught 4 classes a day instead of 5 or 6 classes a day plus, lunch duty, things like that. So giving teachers the time to really work together, and trusting the teachers to do what needs to be done. That would be my magic wand.
Very good. I just want to ask, and I think Lee, actually, you mentioned this a little bit in your opening there about kids asking, like, when will I ever use this? Like, we talk about these contents and these courses being important for STEM careers and things like that. But can some of you just chime in on what are the things that we think kids are getting that are not just STEM career related? What skills or soft skills are we building in the math classroom that are more important in a more general sense and for all students, no matter what their futures are?
I'll start on that one. Sorry. With my students, I want them to understand that there's often multiple ways to approach a problem, right? And that you might have one way to do it, but somebody else has a different way, and maybe their way is more efficient, or maybe their way works better in one situation than another. So that flexible thinking, I think, is something that they can gain from math class.
We just ended an election here, depending upon when we listen to this episode in November 2022. And I believe mathematical practice 3 is something we can really engage in to really help children become better in the society, which is construct viable arguments and critique the reason of others. And in a math classroom, we have opportunities to allow children to engage in discourse, allow them to state their point of view. But the key is they got to construct a viable argument. And then most importantly, you got to critique it. And through a factual lens, that could be pivotal as these children grow up to be productive members of society.
I'd
love
say,
to just
no, Nolan, go ahead, buddy.
with that same idea, like with a focus that's away from standards as the priority, you can really focus on growth and learning and process over product through something like all of the math practice standards, especially number 3. But if we have kids that can attend to looking for structure, that can help them look for patterns in the way they hear arguments outside in a socio-political context. If we have kids attending to like different tools that are appropriate for a certain situation, we can get people sort of away from looking at one way to think about something or do something. So I think there's really a place for us to use all of the math practice standards in the math classroom as a place that really stretches far beyond the math content.
Yeah, I co-sign Nolan for sure. I think I'm going to stay on message here, which is I think they can learn to be creative, right? Like if we think about what Lee's talking about, this space of like understanding that problems can be approached in more than one way. If we think about what Dr. Childs is talking about with constructing viable arguments, like that's a creative space. I think we lose sight of that because we're so focused on getting stuff done that math is a playful and creative space. And that transfers to so many other places and paths that they might take in their lives. So for me, it's about creativity.
And I'll chime in. I'm actually going to quote the Zach Champagne here, because up in Northwest, he was saying that, you know what, these kiddos, they have ideas. And we want to hear them, and we want to validate that they have ideas, and we want to build upon those ideas into, a bigger space kind of thing. So I think they need to realize that they do have voices, and, to put away the notion that, oh, I'm not a mathematician, math is not hard, like, no, put that away, because you do have ideas, and we could build upon that, and we could, be open to everybody's ideas, and realize, going with Lee, that there's a bunch of different ways to solve problems. I usually tell my kids, look, it's important for us to get to New York. How we get there is up to you, and I want to see what your journey is, but the important part is that you get there. Anyway, that's usually the analogy I tell them. But yeah, I think kids need to find their voice and be able to express it. And we need to validate as teachers, like, no, your ideas are important. Your voice is important. It matters to me. And kind of riff off of that and kind of, all come together. Yeah.
So the final question that I have tonight is how we are assessing students. Is that part of the problem?
Y'all go ahead, Zach. I was like, everybody got quiet, but I'm ready.
I'm gonna pull a Dr. Childs and peel this way back. I think it depends on how you define assessment, right? Talking about assessment for the purposes of grades or the purposes of something that's high stakes and telling us about where one kid is on one given day and one given hour, then yeah, that's part of the problem. I think if we're thinking about assessment in the way that I think probably most folks on this panel, most folks who are listening to this podcast are thinking about assessment, which is as a way to gain information about what a kid understands and adjusting our instruction based on that information, then no, that's the one solution to this problem. But I think to your point, I think, Rob, yes, the way that the general sort of math education community thinks about assessment, yeah, problematic.
I want to chime in about the fact that assessment can be done a little bit differently. And I feel like at one point, there was a consideration to do things like portfolio assessment and authentic assessment and things like that. And at one point I taught in Vermont in the 90s, and they had a statewide portfolio assessment system. And it wasn't so much that every single student was assessed. They would randomly select portfolios from the different schools, and those portfolios would get assessed over the summer. And that was just kind of a way to see how students were doing around the state. So I think assessment in some ways important just to kind of gauge where we are, but not every single student needs to be assessed on every single thing every single year.
I think this assessment question is interesting, and I think a whole nother debate. But I want to come in from the teacher's perspective in that I think it creates an undue pressure with teachers. I've seen teachers that say, no, we got to get everything taught by April. And I'm like, holy smokes, there's no, how do you do that and yet teach it so richly and in depth? And that's tough. I don't understand that. And then, I know teachers that try to get it all done by February so that they can spend 2 months reviewing. And I said, but if you teach it well the first time, what are you doing? I don't. So I think it obviously creates this undue pressure. You even said you used another book just to get through the high stakes testing or whatever. And I think there would be a little bit more freedom to do more project-based learning, more if we didn't have to worry about that end goal come April, May, June, whenever you take your test. I mean that's unfortunately what districts and counties are all banking on. Heck, it's in the headlines all over the media about, how well have our kids done in the past couple of years. I mean, it's splashed all over the place. So if we didn't have that undue pressure, just starting from the teacher level, and then of course, working all the way up through the media, I think math could be taught in a much more friendlier, and less stressful environment.
Go ahead, Raj.
I mean, if you're talking about high stakes testing, I'm pretty sure a couple of people use their magic wand to get rid of it. High stakes testing, as everyone has said, is created some unintended incentives and consequences, right? So I'm not going to rehash those here. I guess my lens on those kinds of tests is, what are they measuring? And what can they measure? And I feel like it comes out of this notion that, what gets measured gets managed, or whatever people say. How do we measure curiosity? How do we measure your ability to hypothesize or conjecture? Can you measure that on a test? I don't know. Is it important? Probably. There's so many things that we can't measure. And yet we just rely on this test that basically just measures your ability to produce answers because that's what computers are good at. So yeah, there's a gigantic problem with this, not assessment in the classroom by the teacher or formative assessment. I mean, maybe there's a problem there too, but what we're talking about is this other piece. And I just think we have to really think about what we want to measure. And what was the point of measuring it in the first place? And how has that data been used to impact people in negative ways?
All right. I think that will end our questions here. I'm going to have us wrap up with just 10 seconds for each of you. I'm going to a little pop quiz for you. If you are going to rewrite the whatever Common Core standards or whatever future things were coming out there, what is a word or phrase that you would want prominent in there of the goals for future math classes? Just a word or phrase, keep it nice and brief. And I'm just going to go through the same order again here. So starting with Zach, what would you want?
I'm on brand, creativity.
Okay, and Raj?
Be curious.
Nolan?
Student choice.
Lee?
Making connections.
Chris?
Critical race theory, just to make people mad. But in all honesty, culture response to pedagogy.
And Kristen?
Play and explore.
Excellent.
So this was absolutely wonderful. I'm super excited that you all decided to join us again. Thank you all to our guests for such deep thoughts. You've given us a lot to think about as we're ending up, 2022 here, and
our first season.
This is amazing. Yeah, it's our first season, and I'm so happy. Chris and I are so happy to have you all on. This has been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and to our listeners, I hope they will go to our Twitter at DebateMath and continue this discussion. Share your thoughts about what the purpose of math class is.
And as we're wrapping up, once again, let's go around the horn. Zach, where can listeners find you?
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Zach Champ, ZAKCHAMP. So my full name is Zach Champagne, but Zach is ZAK. And then my website's the same thing. You can check it out there. I write about my classroom at ZAKCHAMP.com.
You had an excellent Ignite video that was just posted on your blog. Total video credit. I don't know who it was, but that
cinematography is incredible. It's an incredible cinematography.
Fantastic.
I appreciate whoever did that. Thanks, Rob.
Also, Raj, where can everybody?
You can find me on Twitter at DRRHASHAH or at my website, drrajshah.com.
And Nolan, where can listeners find you?
I'm still on Twitter at Nolan Fossum.
And Lee.
I'm on Twitter, mathteacher24, and occasionally I blog at mathteacher24.blogspot.com.
Dr. Childs, where can everybody find you?
First, I want to thank Chris and Rob and give you all flowers for what you've done. Like, I know this is like us giving our shots, but shout out to you all for this amazing show that you've put together. I just wish you all lots of success as you move forward. You can find me at all social media platforms, the old ones, the new ones, the ones that are coming soon. DRK Childs. And my website is ChristopherChilds.com.
Thank you, Chris. And Kristen, where can everybody find you?
I'm also on Twitter, Kristen M. Acosta, at Kristen M. Acosta. And they could check out my website, KristenAcosta.com, where I'm blogging, putting up lessons, all kinds of good stuff.
Excellent. Thank you all. That's a wrap.